Just a quick disclaimer that I had some issues with the microphones and the wind when I was recording this interview, but bear with it, and I promise you'll hear a great story from a Desert Storm veteran on his rare truck.
Well, I'm Larry Legro out of Neenah, Wisconsin. This is model 372, which was the last Cabover Peterbilt made.
This was actually built off the 362 Cabover. It's just extended. It's actually a 362 Cabover. It's just been aerodyned.
And the windows have been pushed forward then?
Right. And you can't get that side glass. You can't get any of that stuff now.
How long were they made?
I believe 4 years, and most of them were sold overseas to South Africa and Europe. This was built in '89 and registered as a '90, and some of the states can do that, and that gets rid of the commercial tax.
What is the engine, transmission, all that?
Well, that was a joke. It was built as the first generation Detroit Penske, which was 11.7 liter, I believe, and it had an 8-speed, and it was really just a joke. So I put a 13-speed, so she can get you up and go now, even with that small engine horsepower. She gets up and goes pretty good.
Penske Detroit.
Well, Penske took over Detroit.
Okay.
That's why you haven't heard. Penske owns Detroit. Detroit just was ready to belly up, so Penske kind of saved them, and he came in with a whole engineered electronic engine. And that 11.7 was the first, but it was just a 330, 350 horsepower. It just wasn't enough. So they came out with that 430, and they sold that for years.
I assume it was a Harley Davidson truck?
This was not. This was just a cheap that outfit out of Chattanooga owned called Story and Enterprises, which they bellied up some years ago. I did it on Harley's colors because Harley did have a fleet of them, but they were much more plush than mine. They were 2-team, double sleeper, big horsepower, and they did a turnaround to York, Pennsylvania to Milwaukee in 24 hours. So that's what they did.
Did it work for many years, or?
Kind of got abused. And just store went out of business, and some gentleman from South Carolina tried to put an end up on it. It ended up in Covington, Kentucky at Baskin. So I got it from Baskin's grandson, rang it up home. And it took me about 5 years to put it back together to do it, what it is now. Big Smith from Peterbilt down in Denton found out I had it, so he was the one that pushed me to get it back together. And I ended up taking it down to Denton there in 2016. Like I say, this was the only Denton truck that was ever engineered down.
Any idea how many they made?
I believe it was just over 1,200. I'm sorry, 1,200 from the States. I don't know what they did overseas, but I've seen pictures in South Africa with the steering wheel on the opposite side. I believe they had as many sold in Europe as they sold here. This had that low Peterbilt suspension that everybody wanted. So what happened? Cut the suspension off and reused it for something else. Efficient air ride suspension.
You have other trucks, right?
I've got 6 generations of Cabovers, 48 to 90.
Is this the cream of the crop?
No, more of the 48. I've got an H model. It's quite unique. They only made about 740 of the H models. H stands for high, so it's a 350 high cab.
Did you work a Cabover?
Unfortunately, I did. They weren't Peterbilt. Schneider had the setback 9700 that beat you to death.
Unfortunately, and now you willingly own multiples.
It's fake. You drive an International, it's not a Peterbilt. They're a little different, the suspension and everything. And then drive a 9700, that's a setback axle. I haven't seen a 9700 for a long time, so they're gone. Thing was, I was in my 30s at the time, so I don't know how I would do it now. I never did the air conditioning because it was supposed to be upgraded, and I grew up in the desert, so it would put me to sleep, so I never got the air done.
Are you from out west?
I grew up in Fresno.
What brought you to Wisconsin?
Schneider Snidely recruited me for work in '88. I got here in '89, and I transferred to a Trans-Army Reserve unit from Fresno to Green Bay, and then I was deployed in Desert Storm for a year over there with a trans company. I was an overpaid babysitter with 32 young teenagers from 17 to 23. Sergeant Legro, why are we doing this?
Uncle Sam said so.
Yeah.
You have 6 Cabovers.
The 350, and Peterbilt did something different that nobody understands. They did 350 Cabover or 350 conventional. The 350 Cabover has the same frame and fenders as the conventional. Peak doors are 30 37 inches, but they're all the same, other than the 350 one, which had 34-inch doors. And it was made for a certain company, spec'd out to that company, so that's why they wanted what they wanted. So Ringsby Corporation, their trucks were all spec'd out for what they wanted, and Ringsby had a huge facility in Oakland, and that's where originally Peterbilt was Oakland. I have one of Ringsby's trucks. It's only 18 foot long. I don't even know what you call it, 18 foot long. It's got kind of a funny sleeper. You pull down this little thing and sleep if you want to, but it's kind of a half a cab. And I'm going to try to get it restored, but boy, it's in bad shape. I have the 350, I have the 351, which was the Ringsby's.
That's a conventional, right? It is okay.
They made both. See, people don't know the history of Peterbilt. It was a hostile takeover. Well, see, PACCAR let that all go. That's old Peterbilt. When Peterman passed away, PACCAR came to them to buy the facility, take it all over. The wife and the two sisters, and they must have brought some engineers in that made airplanes because everything went to aluminum. And they were the only company that did that at the time. So I don't know that connection. But the engineers ended up taking over the plant from the family. And in '59, OSHA put some serious problems against them in Oakland. So they moved to Newark with a brand new facility that PACCAR engineered, but it wasn't 100% PACCAR until 1970 because of the fears of all the people that work for Peterbilt saying that I can't say what my brother would call PACCAR, but it's not very nice. And he did not want to work for him. So he had worked for 8 years with Peterbilt and didn't want to go to Tennessee and didn't want to go to Texas because the wages were half. He made $24 an hour in 1968 from Peterbilt, and it was a non-union shop. Peterman didn't want a union in there, but he was union scale. It was a phenomenal job. He made more money than my mother and father together, and they were truly phenomenal. They had even their health insurance. Everything they did was just the best. I was really kind of proud to have a brother work for Peterbilt. It was kind of neat.
What happened was Peterman passed away, and he died awful young. And he was a phenomenal man. During World War II, he built the Navy piers in Oakland. He engineered them all. This guy had like an 8th grade education. He built these phenomenal trucks for the Navy, and you'll never see Peterbilt on it. But I know there are Peterbilt looking at them, pictures of them. If you look at these fuel tanks, oh, I got the wrong truck. The bubble nose has the steel fuel tanks, and they're 35-gallon tanks to transport fuel for the military. And he ended up with all these after the war, and he made fuel tanks out of them.
It's not very often I can climb in and out of a Cabover with one hand, so that's a pretty nice system to get in there.
That's a freight ladder on the bottom. I just didn't like the way Peterbilt did it. There's some things on it I just didn't like, so I changed them. LL specials.
How about this trailer? Is it brand new?
Another LL. I got that down from Houston from a steel hauler from Ryder. And when it got up here, there was $3,000 shipping on it, so Ryder dropped $3,000 off the bill of the truck. I thought that was nice of them, but it was so beat up I got it painted.
What year is it?
2011.
It is very tall from my little chair down here.
Well, there's actually a top that's not on there, and the fairings are damaged, and the top was damaged, so I didn't put them back on. So it actually goes higher. It goes up to 13.6. I kept them, but like I say, they're thrashed.
Is this the original bumper?
You could get a cheap Peter or expensive one. They had plastic bumpers, and it really was kind of a joke. So I had found a 386 Pete, and it fit perfect to the truck. But I had a farmer in Chilton decided to sideswipe me, and I could not find another 386 bumper because they hadn't made them for 30. So that is a maximum. And I split it down the middle, and the guy put it together for me.
And you added a handle here to make it easier to open?
I did. It had a strange handle you went in, but the fiberglass was so rough it cut your hand.
That was another deficiency that it had. It just like tried to open the hood with this the way it was. It had a inlay handle, and you'd actually cut your hand with the fiberglass on the way the hood was made.
The covers on the headlights?
They were LL special. I just didn't like the way the headlights looked. They looked like a sad puppy dog or something where the headlights are in. So I put the covers on, and I can do that with being a collector truck. Commercial, you can't do that.
But I thought it looked better. You tell me.
While it's a Cabover, you still can tilt the whole truck, but, oh, you don't have to. It's all right.
No, I won't. So these are 379s hinges. There you go. The old bubble nose is the same. They open from the front. The fenders go out.
They brought back old technology.
Just super easy to service. Yeah, I drove a brand new 352 from Cape Girardeau, which is Sam Tanksley. If nobody knows who he was, but Sam was unique. I never met Sam, but I worked for him for a year. It was the worst job I ever had. Peterbilt had a discount for 50 trucks, and Sam Tanksley took advantage of that. So he bought 50 Pete's, and then the next year he would register them, and there's no commercial tax in Missouri on a year-old truck. See, so you got federal and state. When you go into the next year and it's used, there's no tax. So that's what he did. So I ended up taking this brand new 352 that had been sitting, and I took it to Los Banos, to their terminal out there. Took one of their trucks out there. I don't remember how I got Shanghai to do that, but and it was really the best Cabover I ever drove.
So you started out driving a Cabover yourself,
Right.
and you.
Well, I guess I did. I drove Kenworths out west. When Schneider hired me, Schneidly, I came back in '89, and I transferred Army Reserve. And it was, figure this out, Fresno's got the 729th Trans Company, and I go to Green Bay, and there's the 890th. How many trans companies are in the country? 7. And I go from one city to the next. Like, am I not destined to go to Desert Storm? You know, as an overpaid babysitter? Jeez. I was over there for a year. 25,000 miles I physically drove. And we drove 1,200,000 miles with 45 tractors. Trans companies have 60 tractors, but the Port of Green Bay was given 15 less tractors. The top trans company in Desert Storm was 1,400,000. We did 1,200,000 with 15 less tractors.
Trucks, yeah.
But the Army gives them to the other company because they'd had more miles. Figure that out. But that's the Army. I drove 2.3 million miles for Schneidly.
In a 9700? Is that
You name it. 9670. Okay. 9670 was the best truck I ever drove for them with a 350 Cummins. It was set up for the tank lines with a long frame. And I kept that for 2 years after they wanted to trade it in because it was such a nice truck.
You said, no, it's mine.
I said, no, I kept it. And
you saved them some money in the long run.
I did. And I ran engine brake. Growing up in California, I ran engine brake. I can't function in a truck without an engine brake. Even my pickup has an engine brake. You know, so I turned this tractor in for a service, and there's no paperwork on the brakes. And the kid's frustrated because there's no paperwork on the brakes. Well, it's got like 470,000 miles on it, and there's no paperwork. Well, I don't use the brakes. I use the engine brake. So this poor kid's like, I'm so tired of getting on the computer and everything's screwed up because nobody does anything. And the guy that runs Schneider's, the Green Bay says, well, that's Legro. He runs the engine brake. He don't use his. He's a real driver, you know.
So if you're a real driver, here's the question. Do you float or double clutch?
Well, it's the equipment.
Depends on what you're driving, right?
Yeah, my old bubble knows you need a double clutch. And the rotor rangers, you can float, you know. It really depends on what you're on. And then when stuff gets beat up, then that's another way to drive it, you know. You got to get the feel of the equipment just the way it is.
Unless you've driven this particular truck, you don't know.
You know, I grew up with owner-operators in Fresno that had 1 million miles on a Cummins engine and didn't even leak oil. But you put 2 drivers on it, and it's all beat to hell. It's really the making of the vehicle and who drives it, you know.
Looking back on your trucking career, 2 million miles, did you say?
More than that.
More than 2 million
I had
miles?
100,000 on one truck in Germany. I had 25,000 at Desert Storm. And that's not we were short drivers. So not only did I run convoys, I drove truck with, you know, the kids. And I was terrified of running the kids. We ran convoys 24 hours a day. So I was always afraid the kids would fall asleep. And I tried to get them at midnight shut down, you know.
When you say kids, you mean
well, they're all kids. Yeah, they're 17. Jake was 17. I used to call him the butterfly chaser. And then the oldest kid we had was 23. So they're all in 19, 18, you know. So you can imagine what I went through. But we got it all done.
I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. It's amazing what those kids done. I don't give them enough credit, but it was hard. It was hard. And the things that happened to us in the war is not a neat thing.
Oh, looks pretty good. Like I said, I put the 13 speed in. It's just night and day. It's just it's so different to drive. You don't even know that trailer's behind you. It's so short, you know. Take care. Good seeing you guys. You know Kevin?
Down there?
He's Bassett's son.
Yes.
He's a character. I knew him when he was like 9.
Those little short shifters can be temperamental.
Yeah. Yeah, the way they made it. I think this is actually longer than what was in there. Chris Swaback did the transmission two seasons ago. I just left the truck up there with him, and he just had it for probably a year.
It's wild how far out the windshield is.
Yeah.